This is the most disorganized one for a while. No content. I'm late by a minute. I'm a stickler for time, though. I like time. Lots of discussion already going, which is good because I got no content. So I need someone to make stuff up. Because the entire week has been busy. Stuff has happened all week. But then I sat down this morning, I looked at it and go, what have I got of like single substance things to talk about? And turns out not so much. We will talk about what we've been doing because, yes, Stefan's here. Steph and I have been doing a lot of stuff. Fixing some of my code. I think fixing some of your code too, if I'm completely honest. I don't think I'm entirely to blame. We'll talk about that in a moment. Let's talk about the sponsor first. These guys, Report Your RI. Sounds good. Report Your RI. Scott's brainchild of many years ago. Scott Helms, guarding you from rogue JavaScript. Don't get pwned. Get real-time alerts and prevent breaches. Hashtag secure your site. I will take credit for using AI to generate that description for Scott as well. I feel like Report Your RI probably doesn't need much of an introduction here, but if you haven't seen it before, go check it out. Go get CSPs. Go and get all of the other bits and pieces that Scott does. It is a very, very cool service, and it's been awesome to watch it grow over, how long now? 2016? 2017? I can't remember. It goes back a long way. Scott and I have done many of these podcasts together, talking about Report Your RI. Content. Good. People have got stuff. Brad, did you get a mechanical keyboard yet? If so, which one? I have a tab open. I've got a lot of, I must have. Is there a way of counting the tabs, how many tabs you have open in Chrome? Not manually either, because that's going to be hard work. I must have 100 different Chrome tabs open. They've all got important things on them. I'm going to get to them. One of them has got the Digma Raise 2 keyboard, which I feel like was the one that was just the one that was popping to the surface. It's a pre-order. I think it's meant to start delivery this month though. Thank you for your support during the launch campaign. Not mine, I haven't given them any yet. Raised over 630 grand, sold 1,527 keyboards. These do look the goods. They look very, very sweet. They look very nicely made. I like the theory. It's a split keyboard. I feel if I'm going to go down this route, it's going to be one of, like so many things in life, where I'm going to need to actually slow things down, invest time to learn to use it properly so that I can then be more efficient later on. A friend of mine who I used to work with at Pfizer used to have this term. He said, we're too busy chopping down trees to sharpen the axe. And that's often what it feels like. In the same way as there's so many other things. This is one of the awesome things of having Stefan as well. There's so many other things out there that I haven't seen or I wasn't aware of or wasn't doing efficiently because I didn't take the time to invest to learn them better. Anyway, yeah, so that's the plan at the moment. Digma Raise 2. I'll drop that in the comments here in case anyone in the chat, in case anyone wants to have a look at that. I think it looks pretty sweet. I kind of, you get a little bit of a feel for a company, right? What do they stand for? What sort of people they are? And I've been watching some of their videos as well, and it just feels like our people. So that's my plan at the moment. I will get to that open tab, and I will order it. I think the thing I'm hesitating on is it's going to be a keyboard of many, many hundreds of dollars. American kinds too, not the cheap Australian ones. And there's something in me. It's like I want to be really, really confident this is the right thing, particularly when it is a departure from my classic Microsoft Sculpt ergonomic keyboard. So, and then I got to see if Charlotte wants one as well. Like, do we both make the leap? Is she ready to make the leap and invest the time to learn to, who knows? JJO is here, Jason O from London, g'day. First time live. Now, JJ has mentioned the cyber attack against Transport for London, TfL, this week. Seems they caught it early. They say everything is still functioning and their API feeds have been down for 3 days. Now, this popped up a lot in I got up, sometimes you just get up one day and then there's a whole bunch of different emails and DMs and tweets and things about this. And this was just one of these things where obviously a lot of people got communications from Transport for London all of a sudden. And I found it odd, and I'll explain why I found it odd. So let's find, where's that message here? It was a few days ago, wasn't it? Oh, we should talk about that NCA thing too. That was actually pretty funny. Yeah, okay. I'm just scrolling back through my tweets. Where was the message from Transport for London? Because it was a kind of a weird message. It's like, hey, we just want to let you know we don't think anything that impacts you has happened. So, okay, here we go. So, Transport for London, tfl.gov.uk. Cybersecurity incident where cookies. Hang on, we've got to read the cookie warnings first. Manage cookies. What happens if you go manage cookies? We got time. Essential cookies, functionality cookies, performance cookies, advertising cookies. Manage how our partners use data and reject legitimate interest processing. Oh, now we've got even more options. Who reads this shit? Seriously. All I wanted to do is read a weird cybersecurity notice. Now how do I get rid of this? So we'll just do what everyone does. Just accept all the cookies. Done. Fine. Cybersecurity incident. We're currently dealing with an ongoing cybersecurity incident. At present, there is no evidence that any customer data has been compromised, and there has been no impact on TFL services. Well, why are you telling everybody? The security of our systems, customer data is very important. Oh, very important to us. You know what that means. And we have taken immediate steps to prevent any further access to our systems. Which is saying that there was some access to systems, and then but they haven't told you what it is or any more information. We're working close with the relevant government agencies to respond to the incident. We will update you further when the incident has been resolved. Because then, once it's been resolved, there will still be no impact to you. I don't know if this is one of those abundance of caution things where now everyone's like, oh, shit, if we don't say something, we could get in trouble. Let's just say something, even though there's not actually anything to say. This just feels that the fact that it seems to have been emailed to a very large number of people. It just seems completely unnecessary. And let's get onto the signal to noise bandwidth for a moment. Bandwidth? Bandwagon. Jeez. We get so much communication these days. I was ranting the other day. Every time you buy something now, or you stay somewhere, or I order something from a website, I get a survey every single freaking time. I get a package delivered, and Australia Post sends me a survey. How is your package? Well, it arrived, mate, that's all. If it doesn't arrive, I'll let you know, and they'll be upset, and that will be the answer to your survey. But otherwise, I don't want to give you a rating between 0 and 10 of how good the guy was at putting it in the letterbox like that. Anyway, the point is, there's so much noise now that it makes it hard to focus on the important things. And isn't it odd that on the one hand, we have Transport for London saying, we just wanted to let you know about an incident that has no impact on you and you don't need to do anything and just go about your business as usual. And then on the other hand, we've got organisations where we've been proper breached, your data is floating all around the web, but we're not going to tell you. We'll tell the regulator because we don't have to tell you. We're not going to let you know that there is something of actual concern. This does my head in. As soon as I said that, I immediately thought, what else does my head? Oh, resellers. We'll come back to resellers. I found a bug today, Stephen, a bug from my code that is definitely the fault of resellers. I'll explain why shortly. So Jace says, TFL run all the buses and undergrounds in London. Also bought a Prusa Mark IV on your advice. Thank you, love it. Oh, good stuff. Did you get the Prusa Mark IV S Plus? What do I call the new? There's a slightly revised one, which just came out a few weeks ago, which I have ordered the upgrade to. Different fan construction by the look of it, Mark IV S. So I got a notice the other day saying it had just shipped. So yeah, you've said no, the Mark IV. I think ordering that upgrade, and if you ordered the printer recently enough, you might find they even honour the upgrade and they just send it to you. You can't use this currency in the cart. and then there's currencies to select from, and then save changes, and the drop down doesn't work. We're suddenly finding a lot of content for this week. I'll talk about this in the moment, but I added a lot of other block lists to the pie hole just yesterday. And today I'm finding all the things that break now because of that. And I wonder if this is it. Stuff that was breaking this morning was things like I'm looking up accommodation for our upcoming US trip. And you do a search in Google, and the Google searches themselves, often the links are sponsored or so on, and they link through to trackers and they get blocked. But this was actually a website, which then obviously was using affiliate links, and the affiliate links were blocked. So I then find myself copying and pasting the name of the resort, trying to then get a Google search to show it up. That also is not a sponsored ad because they're blocked too. So I have a feeling I'm going to have to go through and wind back a few of those block lists, or at least some of the domains that regularly get blocked. Yeah, so the revised model, Jay, if you have a look at it, is just it's really just the fan shroud, I think. There's something else that changed. There are a few other little things that changed. Seems to be worthy of an upgrade. A little bit like I was saying with Digme, you get a sense of the company. Prusa, I have spent time with in person, with Joseph in Prague. And they're super cool. They're just a really, really good company. Again, very much our people. So go and have a look at that upgrade. See if they can give you the upgrade. That's what I'd be asking. All right, glad you got it though. You will have loads of fun. I haven't printed anything for a couple of weeks, and yesterday I walked past and said, I'm going to turn it on. Just turn it on, and that will be my prompt to then think of something to print. I just caught up. Jay says, evening step and boss is late. Have a word. Yeah, I know. I'm not usually late. Scott's sponsoring but isn't here. Guess he's busy dealing with resellers. All right, let me tell you how much I like resellers. The code that I've just broken, that I've figured out, scrolling back a little bit, I'm just not sure why they're here. Because companies either don't want to pay with a credit card, so they go to a reseller that can bundle everything together and then charge you, and then you can pay with an EFT, and then the reseller can put a credit card into our website, or because for reasons that still aren't clear to me, and I don't think anyone's actually been able to give me a good explanation for this, companies sometimes just want to do everything through the wrong reseller. So there's all these different services out there they buy, and they're like, let's just have one relationship with the reseller. We'll buy everything through them, and then they'll go out and purchase the bits. So resellers are a thing. When I was at Pfizer, one particular reseller, who incidentally is the one that's our most prevalent reseller now as well, everything had to go through them, and we could do exceptions and things, but yeah, there was a big push to do that. Now, I wrote about this, and I talked about it last week, so I won't go all over it again, but I wrote about it last week, and I was expressing my disdain at resellers. Some of them are freaking obnoxious too. It's just like the tone of the messages that comes through. One of them we actually blocked. We're like, don't even come back again. Don't ask for anything, because it was stuff like, before we can buy products on your platform, we need you to sign our agreement. Like, hang on. You want to come and buy our stuff, our services, why would we sign your agreement? Imagine walking into the noodle bar going, I'd like to order some noodles. Before I order the noodles, I just need you to sign my agreement here, which says if we have a dispute about the noodles, you will come to my country, and then we'll fight it out in court in Australia. Anywho, so resellers are a thing. Now, what it means is that instead of this beautifully simplistic model where we have customers, and the customers are the ones using our product, and the customers are the ones paying us the money, we've also got this situation where a reseller sits between us and the customer, but not completely. They sit between us financially, but then they don't sit between us service-wise. So let's call it Acme Core Reseller, just so I don't throw anyone under the bus. Acme Core Reseller comes to us, says, we would like to buy a subscription on behalf of our customer. Please give us a quote. Charlotte has to go and create a quote. We're definitely going to automate that stuff. And every morning we get up and she's just got so much paperwork to do for stuff that could be automated. Anyway, particularly now with the renewals coming through 12 months later. So we give the reseller the quote. The reseller then gets they give their customer then their own quote, which is marked up substantially. They don't do this for free. I knew they didn't do it for free. I was wondering how much markup they put on it. So our top tier publicized public API thing at the moment is like the largest API with the largest domain searches for a year, and it's like $1,350. And in the back of my mind, I could see them marking that up 25%. I could see them adding a couple of $100 on top of that. Actually, that would be more than that, wouldn't it? A few $100 on top of it. No. 230% was the price. And in fact, this one was, I think it was the old price that was like $1,150. And then they were charging the end customer like $2,600. And the reason we found out is because, I know we're going to lose resellers from this. A lot of resellers, it wasn't their first career choice, is my guess. They didn't grow up going, I'm going to become rich and successful and resell software. I think a lot of people playing this role are, they defaulted to that position. Let's just say that. So they made a silly mistake and accidentally sent us the quote that they had sent their customer. Yeah, more than double the price. 2.5 times the price. So when we're sitting here churning out all this code, processing breaches, dealing with all sorts of crazy stuff, and they go, let us sell this to a customer and make it more than twice the price. Now, mind you, the customer knows how much the thing is. The customer's not finding us through resellers. The customer's finding us because they know me or they know the project or something, and they know exactly how much it costs because on the website, and we don't discount for the reseller. So the customer has come to the website and seen, and part of the contention here was this was just before the price change, and the reseller was pissed because they weren't aware that the price had changed. And now, instead of effectively being like a 230% markup, they were only getting like a 200% markup, and they were unhappy about that. So the customer has gone, the real customer, the end customer, has come to the website and seen the price and gone, okay, it's $1,150. We've got some ginormous domain. Yeah, seems reasonable. Let me go to the reseller and give them $2,600 instead. Someone's making money out of this, I know that much. So anyway, moving on with the problems with resellers. What it means is that we effectively have two different types of relationship. We have a direct relationship with the end customer, which is more than 90% of instances. And then we have the reseller situation where the financial relationship is with the reseller, and then the service relationship is with what we refer to as the end customer. Now, one of the changes we made, and this is where I broke stuff the other day, one of the changes we made is have a Bamponed as a system. That's all custom code. Steph and I can do whatever we want to with that. And then we've got Stripe, and Stripe does all our processing and billing and everything else. Now, in Stripe, you have a concept of a customer. Who is the customer when it's a reseller? Is the customer the end user because they're the one using the service, or is the customer the reseller? And we'd kind of had a bit of a messy thing up until I broke the code a week ago. We'd kind of had a bit of a messy thing where Charlotte would sort of set it up as the reseller so that the reseller would get invoiced, they'd get the bill and they'd pay the bill and everything. And then we'd change it to be the end customer because they're the ones that we actually offer the service to. And really this was fraught with problems. So we got to the point where we went, well, what we can do is really our financial customer is the reseller. So they should be the customer in Stripe. They should always be the customer in Stripe. But in Stripe, we can put metadata. So we can have metadata, which is whatever we want it to be. It's just name value pairs. So we created metadata, which is like end customer email. So if it's a reseller, in the metadata, we can say, look, they're a reseller. We'll bill to the reseller. It's the reseller's address, the reseller's tax data, whatever else. But we will record who that end customer is so that when Stripe then talks to Have I Been Pwned via webhooks, it can say, hey, look, there's been a purchase, it's been made, this is the end customer. Now also then Have I Been Pwned needs to do things, and this is what we only pushed out a week ago, such as the end customer isn't meant to be able to see the quotes, the invoices, the receipts for the service that we've sold them via a reseller. Resellers get pissed at this. Apparently they get really pissed if their customers work out they've massively overinflated the price. So we've had some of them be pretty freaking obnoxious, to be honest, about do not tell the customer what the cost is. And I'm like, it's on the website. And I publicly say we don't discount for resellers so that they know what the cost is. I mean, really, most of the time, the resellers and the customers are the only parties that know everything because they know what the product is actually charged at and then they know what they've paid for it. So they know what the markup is and they know the margin for the reseller. Anywho, so I wrote code and the code allowed for this metadata to be the email address, which then gets set on Have I Been Pwned. So the Have I Been Pwned records the email address. We've got a little flag now to indicate whether or not it's a reseller account, and then it all lines up and it's fine. And if you make a change in the Stripe side, so for example, after I wrote this code, I said, okay, Charlotte, just go through, go find all the resellers, make sure it's the reseller's email address on the customer, and then go and add the metadata, which is the end customer. And when you do that, the webhook will call Have I Been Pwned, it will update, good to go. And then the last couple of days, we've had a couple of tickets from people who've said, hey, I changed my email address, not through resellers. So this is direct customers, good people. That sounded very Trump, didn't it? People who've changed their email address. We've got an email address change feature in Have I Been Pwned, and then couldn't see their subscription anymore. And what I've worked out, and I still don't know why it's doing this, but whereas before, when you change your email address in Have I Been Pwned, it would tell Stripe, change the email address in Stripe, then Stripe would call a webhook to then change it in the database in Have I Been Pwned. Now what's happening is that webhook isn't actually changing it. So the Stripe change is happening properly and the Have I Been Pwned change isn't. Now, fortunately, we've got a log of email address changes, so I can go through and fix them once I fix the underlying code. But that is my problem to solve as soon as I finish this weekly update, and it is all resellers' fault. It's not my code. Jay says, we use a reseller because they are pre-approved and don't have to do much due diligence. But where do we even begin with that, Jay? What due diligence are you doing on the reseller that you wouldn't do on the part? I mean, let's say it's us. And to be honest, even the due diligence you can do on us is a little bit pointless because we're not storing customer PII other than the customer, just a record of having signed up and bought the service. It's not like you sign up and then you put 1 million of your customers' health records in our service. It's not that. We get lots of default boilerplate template questions. What's your SOC 2 compliance? Here's literally a 200 question security survey, which we get over and over again. Actually, Stefan, one of my ideas with that is we should, every time we get one of these, we'll just have a KB somewhere and we'll just take every new question we get and we'll put it all in a KB. And then we'll go, we're not going to fill out your documentation for possibly $3.95, which is the entry-level service we offer. But here's the KB with all of the questions and answers. So I'm just curious, Jay, with the due diligence bit. And when you say finance, love it, we don't have to resell because of pre-approval, we don't have to do much due diligence. What due diligence would you no longer have to do if you bought a Have I Been Pwned subscription through a reseller instead of us directly? Tick box exercise. Yeah, exactly. I knew the answer. I just wanted to hear you say it. And I'm sure if you go and have a chat to your boss will go, yeah, that sounds perfectly reasonable. Let's not do that anymore. Jay's a medium-sized enterprise. No markup in some cases as they want to keep us. Yeah, well, I can tell you which reseller not to use with 8 offline. Jay says, Given the stress level that dealing with resellers seems to add, is the cost benefit really worth it? Do they bring that much extra revenue for you? So the numbers that we figured out the other day is, in terms of a percentage of customers, it's sub 1%. In terms of a percentage of revenue of our highest tier, it was about 4%. Now, you could argue either way that it just doesn't matter. It's just small enough not to matter. And you could also, let's say it's 4%, for the sake of simplicity. You could also argue that for the customers that, again, they didn't find it through resellers, found our service and it's like, yes, I wanted to get this, I want to sign up to have a been pwn, and then the boss says, okay, but you got to go through the reseller. Of that 4%, I'm sure if we said, no, resellers, we just don't do this anymore, I reckon half of them would find a way. And the blog post I wrote is full of comments from people going, you know, we find a way in our organization when we need to, or we've found other ways. And clearly, 96% of organizations by revenue, more than 99% by individual customers, are finding other way. So you make a really good point, and I think we're left with a very, very thin slice. Other people said, well, why don't you just charge so much for a reseller that if they say yes, it's worth it? But I don't want to. I don't want to deal with this shit at all. It is so painful, not just doing the paperwork and everything behind this, but having the conversations. Now, many of them are nice people, don't get me wrong, but so many of them, I've said to Scott before that one time we've got to do an NDC talk or something we do together where we just have messages that have been sent from resellers. I do think, though, that the answer to this, to your point, Joe, that is definitely one possibility. Another possibility is so much of what is being asked for from these resellers, quotes, invoices, renewals, all this other stuff, we can automate away. And we've partly done that. So normally what would happen, someone would say, you know, give me a quote or an invoice or something, and Charlotte would go in and she'd go into Stripe and she'd manually create all that. I think I mentioned this, Stefan, but I've created just a little .NET Console app, plugs in the Stripe API that now does all of that for her. So every single time she gets one of those requests, she goes in a console app. It's a crappy UX, like she puts in the address, presses enter, and then goes, I got the address wrong, how do I go back and edit? Hold down Alt key, press F4, start again, and then see how it goes. But what it has done is it has allowed us to model the process of signing up for a quote or an invoice or so on. So when we have that pretty much spot on, we'll be able to take all of that and go, okay, now let's drop it behind a UX, and then we can give the resellers some sort of interface where they go through and do this. And that will then cut out a big amount of our ticketing, and we just won't have to deal with them as much. So, you know, I think to your point, Joe, maybe that's the middle ground that keeps everyone as happy as possible. And look, there's a bit of me that is very sympathetic to the individuals that are going to the resellers, because they're the people that I have walked in their path. You know, when I was at Pfizer and I was pushed to go to resellers and so on. And all I want to do is I want to go and use this cool service or cool product or something because I'm trying to do the best I can at my job. And my organization has put in this arbitrary barrier. And if the product I'm trying to use then says, no, screw you, get stuffed, you know, that's not good either. If we were more brutal about it, it would be easier. It really wouldn't have much. It would unburden us. We could do more stuff. But anyway, yeah, as Stefan says, that markup is nuts. James says, even Google and Apple only charge around 33%. Now, this was one reseller, and it wasn't the big one that we used the most. So I'm not quite sure what their markup is. But if you are listening to this and you have bought a Have I Been Pwned subscription through a reseller, get in touch and just let me know what they marked it up to, because I am curious to know. There's also an argument, and Scott and I were having this discussion, I think even just yesterday, that part of a valid business model for resellers is, if your goal is to sell more product, and this is what most businesses do, we're a little bit unique this way, but most businesses are there to sell as much of their product as possible. And if you're in that market, resellers are able to put your product in front of more customers. I think it's different for us because A, that's not our primary goal, and B, the product is so well known anyway. I don't know that resellers are sort of, let's say, talking to a CISO in some organization and they go, "Oh, I've never heard of Have I Been Pwned before." Like, I don't think that's the issue, but I can see where they do offer value, and I can see where organizations are incentivized to discount for the reseller, so that the reseller can go and sell it, say the marketed price, but get more traction. So I get that. I just don't think it makes much sense in our situation. Stefan says, can't we just send these surveys some AI bot bullshits the answer with legalese jargon? Yeah, well, maybe the AI is going to fix more stuff for us or make more problems. Not sure yet. RWs says, pick for US Open men's final. Sinner, Draper, Fritz, or Tiafu. I have honestly not been paying too much attention to the tennis. Part of the problem for us is, other than the Australian Open, every Grand Slam is on at a terrible time of day, which generally means we have to stay up really late for Wimbledon or get up really early for the US Open. So I'm totally out of touch. It's a little bit like the Formula One. The only time I get to watch the Formula One is when it's in Melbourne, because even Singapore is a night race and they're only 2 hours behind us, but then it's late in their day and I go to bed real early. So yeah, that's a bit of a shame. Neil says, purchasing are often outsourced and have no idea what they're buying. Beans or software, all treated the same. Hi, by the way. Thanks, Neil. So most due diligence questions and their responses are based on trust. Unless you can walk in and audit company in question, you are always taking responses at face value. Now, this is what I totally agree with you. It's one of the reasons I think these are, I guess we've got to look at what the point of, say, the security questionnaires / due diligence, etc. are. And I don't necessarily think the point is to make sure that you're using an organization who's not going to lose your data. I suspect the point is more that when that happens, you have a more defensible position, you're more likely to claim your cyber insurance, and also you have something to then leverage that organization with. Well, you filled out the questionnaire. You said you had regular penetration tests and you always passed, and now here we are. Part of the joy, again, with Have I Been Pwned, and why I find things like the due diligence stuff a little bit pointless, is think about what it is that a customer gives us when they use the service. So let's say it's one of those public API services. Everyone knows what they do. You can get an API key, you can query the database, or you can query big domains. What are you giving us? Well, you're giving us your email address. Just one. You're registering. You're creating an association with Have I Been Pwned, which incidentally more than half the Fortune 500 already have anyway. So, you're not really adding anything new. You're not giving us any customer data. To my point before, it's not like we're Snowflake DB, and you are storing things of importance in our servers. So what do you get from the questionnaires? And the best I can come up with is you get some sense of how formalized the organization's processes are and possibly how resilient they will be to cyber attack, outage, so on and so forth. But, then again, we've got nearly 11 years worth of running just as we do now. Also, the services we offer generally aren't tied into another organization in such a way that were we to be unavailable for a period of time, it would break their business. Now, just as I said that, there are certainly organizations that use it as a key part of their identity monitoring service, for example, and not having Have I Been Pwned available for perpetuity. So let's just say we shut down, for argument's sake. I can see that would be problematic, but for the most part, it's used in places where if they had to rip it out, it wouldn't really have a lot of business impact. And that's not to sort of downplay the significance of what we do. It's just it's not like a critical path for what most of our customers use the service for. So getting back to the point about what's the value of the security questionnaires, I think it largely comes down to, this is the process we have the box to check, we're going to send it to you. When we get them and they go, list all your certifications, and we go, NA, they always just go, okay. It doesn't matter anyway. When we get questionnaires around things like, it'll be things like, explain your processes for discarding of devices that reach end of life. And I just go, I factory reset the iPhone and I give it to the kids. And they just like, okay. So I don't think the substance of them really matters that much. And I suspect that it is a very, very small, probably sub 1% of customers who have decided not to use our service because we don't have so much of that formality around it. And again, I think just the nature of being a fairly simple service gives us that leisure. Joe says, the amount of individual work Charlotte needs to do and code you need to write, test fix, etc. When will you recoup the cost of time involved? Well, I mean, that would depend very much on the value you put on your time, isn't it? My time is priceless, man. I'm losing valuable jet ski time when I'm sitting here responding to those. I think there's just a bit of the back of my head that just wants to make it as accessible as possible to as many people as possible. And I know that we're just eating a bit of shit at the moment to get to the point where we can automate that part. And I really think this is a September, October thing where we solve that problem with automation. We've just got a couple of things that we've got to code up first, and then we'll do that. And as I said, I've already written the console app that Charlotte's using to automate this. So all we really got to do is just put another interface on top of it, and we're good to go. Joe says, your desire to help those of us trapped in enterprise hell is laudable, but not healthy for you. But then what would we have to complain about? You know, we all like a good complaint, don't we? John says, there's resellers, and then there's value-added resellers, VARs. We buy stuff through resellers and then sell it to customers, often with services attached that the reseller cannot provide. Well, if you actually do stuff, that's a different story. I guarantee you the resellers that we're using, because I know some of them pretty well because we use them at Pfizer, they don't give you anything else. All they give you is a bigger bill than what you would have paid otherwise. There is no value added there. Neil says, back when I started, the phrase was, no one fired you for buying IBM. Classic phrase. When other companies made PCs at a fraction of the cost, I think resellers and due diligence are the same. Well, what I'm hearing is that we need to go into the reseller business. God, I can't think of anything worse. That phrase came from a time where, IBM were dominant. They were the de facto standard. Anything else was seen as a risk. You went out there and you bought IBM, and it's like, okay, you're fine. And of course, over the course of time, that changed, but it took competition and it took other alternatives. I get what you're saying. John says, for a lot of our vendors, we have to buy from a reseller. Our services include configuration, installation, management. Yeah, and I guess that also depends on what the product is. For Have I Been Pwned, particularly for domain searches, I actually don't know the stats on this, but I think most people buying subscriptions from us are doing it to monitor domains, and there's a web UI to do that. It'd be a little bit like, it's probably not a great example, but if you bought, accounting software or somewhere, actually that's confusing. You'd probably get someone to help you do that. But for something that's just an online service, it kind of doesn't make a lot of sense. Stephen says, we could go into the reseller business and write our own payment platform as well. Let's talk about Stripe while we're on that. In that blog post, I mentioned Stripe, and I said, I think technically and engineering-wise, I really love what they do. I've got the Stripe CLI open right here, helping me debug the problem with this email change. I love that. Love the APIs. I think the dashboard is really neat. I really like the way they've done that. The webhook inspections and things as well are super, super cool. And really the places that Stripe was falling down for us, I suspect are probably twofold. So one was where there are regulatory hurdles to overcome. We would like to be able to accept EFT payments. If we could accept EFT payments, we could cut out a bunch of the resellers because people are going to the reseller in order to do EFT payments. So that would be awesome. It might be very difficult for them from a regulatory perspective, but they do already do that in multiple other countries outside the US, just not yet Australia. And then the other part of it was just them simply not yet having built in the mechanics to do things like what happens when you have subscriptions that renew, but you might want to pay in advance, or you might want to give a quote for an existing subscription that's going to renew, but you want the quote to be for the renewal period. They just don't have a model to do that yet. I don't believe that would be a regulatory constraint. I think that's more an issue of writing code and adding more moving parts to what is already a pretty complex system. I will say I've had multiple conversations with the folks at Stripe since that blog post, and my experience with them reconciles my feelings about them generally technically. Super, super nice people. So thank you, Stripe people. I know you've probably got a gazillion requests for various things, and I appreciate what you do. JD says, why not set up a subsidiary in the UK for electronic payments? That's just under the love heart. Not sure why I'd say UK, just to add like yet another country into the variables here. One of the options is Stripe has a service or a program called Atlas. And the idea of Atlas is you can set up a US entity, and that US entity can then have payments that go via EFT. Now, this seems to be mostly, and the reason I mention Atlas is a lot of people, when I first started talking about this ages ago, said, look, Atlas is there for this. But Atlas seems to be very orientated towards startups. We're 11 years old now. Startups who need to get all the mechanics of things like a corporate entity and accounting and bank accounts and all the other stuff going. We have all of that in place. I don't want to have another foreign entity that we then have to deal with all of the tax and other things around. And to Joe's point earlier on, it's like, how much pain do you want to go through for that tiny audience? I can go through the pain that we're going through at the moment because we can solve that. I'm not going to go through the pain of having a foreign entity. That's just, my God, my accounting so far is an absolute nightmare already. And Jay says, yeah, US tax returns are a nightmare. UK easier. It's even easier? Not adding more. Anywhere else, even in Australia. Sam says, any update on Coinhive? Also, how's the home automation going? Let's have a look at that Coinhive stats. It's still getting like an alarmingly large number of requests to coinhive.com, which is nuts. Like, why are we still seeing so much? So, HTTP traffic, last 24 hours, 44,000 requests to coinhive.com in the last 24 hours. What are these people doing? What about in the last 30 days? Damn, 1.7 million requests. We had one day there where there were 121,000 requests to coinhive.com. Now, I'm looking at the Cloudflare Analytics dashboard here because I've added no further analytics or other tricky things ourselves. I can see the referrers here. Top referrer, apk-vip.blogspot.com. Now, the interesting thing here, when we see a top referrer like that, somewhere on this, obviously website related to distributing APKs, I would imagine, somewhere here, someone's embedded Coinhive. Now, it is apparently all in Russian as well. Bit of an odd one. Next top referrer, s.weibo.com. And then another Blogspot one, xvideos, something, school-shop.su, another Blogspot one, malware.wicca.org. Now, here's an interesting one. So there's an IP address here that's got 5,190 requests to. Where is this IP address? What happens if we go there? Is that publicly accessible? I think so. What is on there? And then the last one here in my list of top 15, do movie free for you, .blogspot.com. If anyone has any good ideas about analysis I can do on this to learn some interesting stuff, I know there's a very, very broad way of putting it, please let me know. Interestingly, volume by country, the number one country by a significant margin is China. So of those 1.7 million requests, 580,000 of them were China, 328,000 US, then it's Russia, Singapore, Japan, Germany, Czech Republic. Overrepresenting, I would say, for their size, UK, Brazil, Indonesia. Put that onto my to-do list. I need to do more with that. Wayne says video wall, HIBP stat screen progress. Yeah, so here's the progress. There is, I think it's an 74 on 80 inch or something TV sitting over there in the same place it's been, I think, for about 18 months now. One of the things on the backlog that Stefan has there with his name next to it as well is to do our dashboard. And then what I'm thinking, and I can't turn the camera around because it's very securely mounted to the wall, but I'm going to rotate that TV to be vertical, and it's going to fill a wall over there because that's about how wide the wall is, and we're just going to have cool stats. Some of the stats that we've been looking at just recently, Stefan, around performance and things like that. Let's talk about that actually, because you did make some good gains this week. Yeah, and Stefan just said, wasn't that what we're looking for looking at Grafana for? And yes, and I'm still paying for that Grafana dashboard that I'm not using in Azure. One of the things that chewed time in our week this week is, I've discussed before, we've been rolling over for many, many months now. We've been rolling over from a SQL server back, or rather from a table storage backend, which was the original backend repository for Have Been Pwned, to a SQL Server repository. And we had a little bit of time pressure because Microsoft was deprecating version 1 of their storage accounts and you had to upgrade it to version 2. I was a bit worried about what would happen doing that with billions and billions and billions of rows. Like, what happened if it went out? And we're doing the table storage or the SQL migration anyway. Let's get rid of the table storage dependency before the last day of August, which was the rollover date. Now, what we ended up doing is we realized that we actually have table storage for 2 different classes of data for every single email address and every single breach. We've got one which is the plain text, and then we've got one which is SHA-1 hashes, which we use to drive the k-anonymity searches that the likes of Mozilla and 1Password use. And what we ended up doing is just no longer querying the plain text email addresses which are on V1 and only querying k-anonymity, which was on V2. So when someone actually does a search for an email address, we can take it and we can hash it and we can effectively turn that into a k-anonymity search. We rolled the domain searches, which have to query a plain text repository of email addresses, because you need to be able to search for a domain and then see all the aliases in plain text. We rolled that from table storage to SQL Server. So for the last, what is it, Stefan, probably a couple of weeks, every time you've done a domain search, it's been hitting a SQL backend. And many years ago, I put in a caching model that every time you did a search for the domain, it would then save that search result in blob storage. And it's only when you load a new data breach that would delete the blob and everything repopulates. So we'd done that. And by pure accident, I realized, in fact, I was demoing to a friend on Monday how the domain search feature worked. And I tried searching for a large domain and it timed out. And we realized that large domains were now timing out on some of the search endpoints. So we then spent the last few days going through a kind of painful process of trying to figure out what the root cause of the timeouts were. And as part of that process, we've added a heap of tests which we can now at least reliably run against a sample large domain. We've got a dummy test large domain in there. We can run this. We can go, okay, how long does it take? I think running it from here for 200,000 records in a very large domain is taking about 9 seconds, which is happy with that. And a lot of that's just going to be latency from Australia. So I put more tests in that, but the cool thing that we just found, having the metrics in App Insights, is we went, what did I say in our Slack stuff? We went from about 360, I think, milliseconds average execution time for this endpoint over the last month down to 91. So we've cut about 75% of the processing time out of that. And we're going to do some very, very cool stuff with Cloudflare, which is going to take that down massively further as well. Anyway, the point is, it's metrics like that that I'd like to get up there on the TV, because they're all important metrics. And if you just wander past it, and you know pretty much, domain searches now I expect to see in about 90 milliseconds. You wander past and one day it's up to 300. You'd be like, oh, okay. And then, of course, we can attach alerts and things like that to it as well. So, yeah, we will do a lot more of that. So the video wall is coming, and it will be cool. Now, JJ, I think you're talking about Coinhive here. You said it will be comments in blog posts, most likely. Possibly. The only thing is in order for that to be true, when it's requesting JavaScript, that blog post comment would have to allow you to embed a script tag and request an external service. If you can do that, you've got a completely different problem. So I don't think it's that. I think you'll find it as compromised websites that seem to have a lot of traffic. I need to get because referrers are now only being sent as host names and not full pars, thanks to browser privacy, we need to do a little bit more intelligence around logging that, which we can do when we control the JavaScript on the site. I'm sure, not to drag you into something completely different, Stefan, but I'm sure we could set up an App Insights instance or something on that, and from the JavaScript that loads in Coinhive, actually log the entire location.url sort of thing. So maybe we could do that. Affliction of Armada says, friend ran a public NTP server in the 90s and early noughties. That IP still gets queried by stuff that's hard-coded as IP 2 decades later. At least that was an explanation. Coinhive hits seem absurd. Yeah, it is absurd. Now, I mentioned Pi-hole as well. So one of the things I did share, and I'll drop it into the comments again here. Someone sent me a link to a service that does an ad blocker check. So basically checks how many ads you're blocking using whatever technology it is that you use to block your ads. I'll drop that into the chat tweet in case anyone wants to have a look at it. So the technology I use to block my ads is the Pi-hole. So dedicated Raspberry Pi running there. All of our DNS queries go through there, and it just black holes a whole bunch of different things that are ads, trackers, and so on and so forth. Now yesterday, I think it was yesterday morning, I tweeted out and said, this is pretty cool because I run it with the Pi-hole on my local network. 79% of ads were blocked. And I did this on the iPad. And then I rolled to 5G where there's no longer any Pi-hole because it's on the local network, and only 4% of ads were blocked. So it made a really big difference. And I'm sure for those of you that use something like the Pi-hole where you get ad blocking at home, but then you go out and you don't get ad blocking, you really, really notice when you're suddenly getting all the ads. There's a whole other story about why I'm not so keen on ad blockers themselves running on the client. But anyway, someone came back and said, you should have a look at oisd.nl to bump that Pi-hole to 100%. So this is obviously a Dutch service on the .nl TLD that has other blocked lists. And I went and grabbed one that is blocks a lot more ads. And I also went and grabbed the not safe for work one, which normally wouldn't bother me personally. Part of my job is I end up on not safe research, not safe for work websites, given some of the data I process. But I was kind of thinking, now the kids are of that age, it's probably not such a bad idea. So that bumped my score when I took these up to 96%. So 96% of ads blocked based on this one tester. Now, of course, this one tester is not perfect. I don't think the mechanics of it are necessarily 100%. Plus, there are other domains that are not on their list that serve ads. So not perfect, but it gives you a good rough order of magnitude. If I now go and have a look at my Pi-hole stats, the domains on the ad list, I went from, I think, 330,000 something up to 982,000, which is a rather hefty lift. But my percentage of blocked requests has pretty much remained the same. I'm sitting about 10% of all requests that all of the devices on my network make are getting blocked by the Pi-hole due to those ad lists. Now, part of the reason I'm not 100% is I do have various domains that I have allowed. So what's on my allow list? If I go to domains here, all the Coinhive ones are allowed, because I know that it's not a malicious site for the discussion we just had. There was a Stripe domain that was blocked by one of them. I have deliberately not blocked ad.doubleclick.net, and the main reason for that is so many things you do a Google search for and then you click on it and then the link doesn't work. And remember, this applies to everything on the network. So when Charlotte's like trying to search for accommodation or something, and then she's like, hey, every time I click the link on this search result, it doesn't work. And of course, the whole reason it doesn't work is because it is an ad, and by enabling it, it does have some tracking, but yeah, usability as well. Stefan says, oh, on the Pi-hole things, I managed to get my UDM Pro to intercept all DNS requests without having to run shady SSH scripts on it. They have support for it in the network app now. I need to blog that. How is that different? I'm managing my UDM Pro to intercept all DNS requests. Okay, all right. What are you using it for? Like, I guess you'd get that from the Pi-hole anyway, because we get all DNS requests there. What's actually blocked the most? Oddly enough, because you have a combination of the top blocked domains and the top permitted domains. The top permitted domain by a massive proportion is haveibeenpwned.com. And the reason why is I've got a Lemetric device here. If you don't know what Lemetric is, Google my name and Lemetric. It's a little display that you can put the weather, your tweet count, whatever you want on. Or you can put a custom component on it. And I've got a custom component that shows the current number of Have I Been Pwned subscribers. Now, this thing doesn't seem to cache DNS results. And it just continues to make DNS queries for haveibeenpwned.com. So that's why haveibeenpwned.com is my number one queried domain. Number one blocked domain. It's an Adobe one, because I've got Adobe Creative Cloud on both my machines. Number two, mask.icloud.com. So obviously from our devices here. Live.com, msn.com, Zoom, and a whole other list of like beaconing addresses, which is kind of interesting. Seven says, some stuff is hard-coded DNS servers and won't adhere to the DHCP rules. Right, so you can't route it through the Pi-hole just by setting DNS on the UDM Pro. This basically says all DNS, okay, we concluded that. I mentioned I'm less keen on running ad blockers on the client. Now, part of this goes back to several years ago. I'll drop this into the chat. Troy Hunt ad blocker problems. Some people got upset with me about this. I wrote in 2016 now. Damn. Here's the blog post in the chat. Ad blockers are part of the problem. Now, the issue I had with this was that a long time ago, pre-2016, I did have ads on troyhunt.com. Classic ads, banner ads. And I can't remember who I was using for that, but I think it tied back into DoubleClick and all that. And they were woeful. I got basically no money from it. I had an experience at one time where people started getting, on iOS devices, redirected to the App Store. They go to my blog to read about security and privacy and then they get redirected to the App Store to buy Clash of Clans. Like, what a shit experience that is. Because, of course, ads inevitably end up being an iframe that runs all sorts of script and pulls in all sorts of images and does all sorts of shady crap on your device. And that was one of the catalysts for me seeing Graham Cluley, another InfoSec luminary, doing sponsorship with just a line of text. And so that's what I did. I rolled to sponsorship. And that's what still exists here today. And it's just a line of text. And I thought, this is wonderful. Everyone will be happy with this because it's not a flashy banner. It's not loading loads of crap into the device, which takes a long time to load, which then makes all these extra requests, which then tracks you, which then has the ability to do nasty stuff because you're running someone else's arbitrary script on your website. It gets rid of all of those problems. Everyone's going to love this. And then uBlock started blocking it. And I'm like, what? Why would you block this? There is no good reason to block this. And then what I learned, and this, I think this is down in the comments here. You had 289 comments on this. It was blocked for cosmetic reasons. So what was happening, or maybe it was ad block. Oh no, they have acceptable ads. But anyway, it was being blocked not because of tracking, not because of, well, actually, I think it was cosmetic and because of ad. Wasn't no tracking issues, no bandwidth performance issues, no shady stuff, none of those risks, but it was still deemed an ad. So some services were deleting it. And it was also, in some cases, deemed, I think the word we used was cosmetic, removing a cosmetic thing. And I literally found definitions for effectively where in the DOM the sponsorship message was so that it could be deleted out of the DOM. Now, this is at a time as well where there's so many websites you go to, and I go there with my Pi-hole on, which blocks all the third-party DNS requests for known ad networks. And the website says you can't view this website until you disable your ad blocker. So, well, part of the reason I have it is because ads consistently do such shady stuff that I don't want it loading on my machine. And I wrote this blog post to say that the problem that we have is there is so much shady stuff that comes from ads. It causes people to want to block stuff, which then causes websites to say you need to unblock it in order to say, like if we just had responsible ads, which I think we would reasonably call that sponsorship message as, that would be okay. And ad blockers are part of the problem, because if they're taking out the responsible stuff, what is the incentive for the shady stuff to roll to responsible? Some people got very absolutist about that. Well, we should be able to block everything. Also, I'm having problems loading some JavaScript on your site. Why am I having problems? Well, because you're running something that literally changes the behavior of the site, and then you're wondering why it doesn't work anymore. So I'm really not keen on that model that just kills everything. And I know you can tweak and customize a lot of these as well. The attitude, and I'll just be careful what I say because I think it's captured in the comments here as well, but the attitude of some of the people behind the ad blockers, which is kill everything, I just find is fundamentally wrong, because it doesn't support an ecosystem where people like me can create content and be remunerated for it in a way that doesn't impact privacy and doesn't impact performance and load times and everything else. So I don't run ad blockers as extensions, partly for that reason, partly because there are many precedents of other ad blockers having gone rogue and had problems, and I don't trust any of them not to do that. Extensions sit in such a privileged position in the browser. I just don't like that idea. The other thing is, you can't get an ad blocker to run on my washing machine. You know what I mean by that is every other device on my network, by virtue of using the Pi-hole, is going to go through and do DNS resolution in the Pi-hole, unless, as Stefan said, they literally hard code in their own DNS resolution, which I haven't even had a look at how many are doing that, which I could if I could intercept it at UDMP, like you've said. But I like the idea of anything that joins the network usually gets the benefit of the Pi-hole. And not only do we get to block the nasty stuff, but I can actually see what these clients are doing. So where are these clients making their queries to? So that's my high horse about ad blockers. Jay says, Stefan, you just write a DNS loop back to that rule and exclude the pinhole, I think you mean Pi-hole, IP from that rule. Stefan, yeah. They have DNAT rules and masquerade that you can set up. I want the devices to know that DNS requests were rerouted, hence masquerade rules. I enjoy watching my Roku fail to call home. Oh, Richard's here. Okay. What if some, so Jake says, what if some applications directly started using DOH to bypass Pi-hole and DNS level blockers? Yep, well then you're not going to see it. I think there is support for DOH within, this is of course of being DNS over HTTPS within the Pi-hole as well. But yeah, if it's literally going over a TLS connection from the client to DNS out, well then, as Stefan says, you're screwed. Because that's the whole point of encryption, that everything in the middle can't actually intercept and modify or redirect. Okay, folks, we managed to fill just over an hour with no plans, with content that I hope was reasonable. As I look at the time here, I can see my Stripe CLI sitting there telling me it needs some TLC, so I need to go and fix my bug with the email address. So I'm going to wrap it up there. I will have some stuff to talk about next week, because I'm doing a very short local trip over the weekend to visit a really, really interesting InfoSec company on Monday. So I'm going to save the news about that. I'm going to talk about that later on next week, and depending on what I see on Monday, I might even write something up, because I think they're doing a really, really cool job. Thanks, folks. Have an awesome weekend. See you next week.